Okay, well, welcome everybody to Myke in Conversation, Myke Jacobs, and I have got in front of me an awe-inspiring list of things that he has done, but what's really amazing from our point of view is he's lived in the Hampstead Garden suburb pretty well all his life, following a family tradition going back 2 generations to the 1930s. So could you tell us a bit about growing up in the suburb and who of your family first moved here, etc.?
Well, thank you and welcome everybody. My both sets of grandparents moved in the late 20s, early 1930s. My father's parents moved from Hackney, and they had previously lived in Spitalfield, so very much an East End family going back to about 1860. And they moved into a house in a road called Spaniards Close. And that's where my father did the second half of his growing up with his three sisters. So he was very much in the minority. My mother's parents moved into a house in Winnington Road, which it so happened backed on to my father's parents' house. And when he was going to school and he was going to work as a young man from home, he used to cut across my mother's back garden in order to catch the 2:10 bus from the top of the road. So that's how they met. And they married in 1938, and they bought a house further down in the suburb, which was where I was brought back to after I was born in Middlesex Hospital in 1948. And so I grew up in a road called Rowan Walk, just off Holme Chase, until I was 19. And as you've spotted, in those days, in the early 40s, or late 40s and early 50s, things were very, very different. And the road on which our house sat was not made up, it was just gravel stones. Although Holme Chase was a made-up road. Milk and eggs were delivered by United Dairies in an orange and white horse and cart with a horse, and I used to get up and ride on the cart with the milkman. But when the road was made up, then they started using an electric truck. I remember my mother used to go to shops in Marketplace, which was a real shopping centre in those days. It didn't have a division down the middle of the road. And she used to get her groceries from a wonderfully named grocery store called Walton, Hassel and Port. And she used to go in there probably 2 or 3 times a week when I was small. And all the groceries were delivered by a boy on a bicycle with a small wheel and a basket at the front. So that's how we got our food. And she went into greengrocers down in Marketplace, and there was everything there, not at all like it is today.
Gosh, what did your parent? Are you an only one? Are you an only child?
No, I've got an elder sister, and I had an elder brother. My sister is a professor of psychology, and my brother was many things, but mainly an engineer, a management consultant, chairman of an art gallery. And he moved to Glasgow in the late 1960s to build the Dumbarton bypass. In fact, I say Glasgow. In fact, he lived in the castle at Loch Lomond as a tenant in a tower. One of the guys downstairs was a Scottish nationalist and blew off his own leg, trying to draw attention to the Scottish nationalist cause in the late 1960s. Things were very different in those days.
So where did you go to school?
So I started off in the suburb. I went to King Alfred School.
Oh, right.
Which was then a very experimental school. It was run by very socialist teachers and parents. And I spent 2 formative years there, and the only person I can remember who was in my class was Zoe Wanamaker.
Oh.
We used to go and sit in Little Wendy House in the garden from 4 to 6. And then I went to the whole school in Swiss Cottage. And then I went to St Paul's School in Hammersmith. So I got further and further away from home, and eventually went to Birmingham University, which was even further away from home.
I know that you were both a tax and charity lawyer. So where did you qualify after Birmingham, I assume?
I only had one place of employment from 1970 to 2005. It was what was called a medium-sized firm of solicitors when I joined in 1970, called Nicholson, Graham and Jones. And as the years went by, it grew and grew. And I ended up as one of the senior partners, and we had 60 partners by the time I left. And it was still called a medium-sized firm.
And it says here that you also were a law reformer, which sounds very, very interesting.
Well, I think law reform very often comes out of frustration.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at university, I was particularly interested in the law of trusts and international law and corporate law. So that's what drew me to Nicholson, Graham and Jones in the first place, because it had areas of practice which covered all of those things. I managed to fail my trust law course and my tax exams early on in my career. So I had to do a lot of extra study. And to cut a long story short, I ended up practicing, particularly in those areas, because by the time I finished catching up, I knew rather more about those things than a lot of other people.
So were you were part of a law reform movement?
Or? Sorry, the law reform movement. So later on in my career, so I started in 1970, qualified in 72. In the mid to late 80s, I started writing articles for legal journals. And the law reform came about because of Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell famously stole £400 million from his pension fund. And the government ran around trying to change the law of pensions without changing the law of trusts, which affected family trusts, wills, and in particular charities. So by that stage, I was the editor of a law journal which specialized in law of trusts. I convened the board, the editorial board, and I said to them, I think we ought to do something about this because we're getting left behind while Professor Good is trying to reform the law of pensions. So the board became something called the Trust Law Committee. And I wrote an editorial in the journal suggesting that the Lord Chancellor ought to reform the law of trusts while they were doing everything else. Curiously, it turned out that the Lord Chancellor didn't read the magazine, which came as a great surprise to me. So I ended up writing to him, and he said no, he wasn't going to change the law of trusts because it was too irrelevant. I got together with a professor from King's College London and a High Court judge, and we formed a proper committee, and we started setting out proposals. And I had a friend who worked at the Law Commission, so I went and saw him, and he said, I think this is quite interesting. So he invited the group of us to go and meet the chairman of the Law Commission, who was Sir Henry Brooke, and we got started drawing up real proposals for the change of the law of trusts, which became the Trustee Investment Act. So it became the Trustee Act 2000, which dealt with the law of investment for trusts, which was very restrictive. And it didn't say what everybody expected it to say. So we got it changed to say the things which people expected it to say. so that, for instance, they could invest all the fund in equities if they wanted to. But I won't bore you with the rest of it. But meantime, I got together with some other people who are involved in remuneration of company directors, who were mainly lawyers. And we formed something called the Share Scheme Lawyers Group, which is now the Share Plan Lawyers Association organization. And we started to set about getting the city authorities to focus on changing the law relating to remuneration strategies and corporate governance. So one way and another, I got involved in a number of streams of law reform. But probably not that interesting to the vast majority of the population, but it was important to me.
And I know that you took early retirement, and you seem to have done an enormous amount since then. So tell us about that.
Okay. Well, in 2003, I had to have a major back operation, and I recovered very well from that. But my wife Ruth and I sat down and said, well, what are we going to do with the rest of our lives? Particularly since at that stage I was 55 years old, and my father had died at 54. So, and quite a lot of my family had died at young ages. So we thought it was time to reconsider. So I retired a few years later, and I set about looking for non-executive directorships, which turned out to be few and far between. But I saw an advertisement in a charity magazine for somebody to become a trustee of an international children's charity. And I knew nothing more about it than that. And I was invited to set up my own interview, which turned out to be in a restaurant in Covent Garden, a Lebanese restaurant, which was very nice. It turned out that I was meeting the founder and chief executive of the charity and his mother, who had both lived in Swiss Cottage when I was a child, in a flat next door to the school that I went to. And the third trustee was a schoolmaster at St Anthony's School. Having started off on this meeting expecting nothing in common, it turned out that we had a huge amount in common. And I was very interested in what the charity did. It turned out to be a charity called Child Welfare Scheme, which subsequently changed its name to Kadasha, which is what it now is. It works for children and young people in faraway Nepal, in the foothills of the Himalayas, and down on the Indian border. And the charity was doing very good work and continues to do very good work in a very, very poor country. It's actually the second poorest country in Asia. And nearly all the foreign money going into Nepal, which is very necessary because of its poverty, goes into Kathmandu, the capital, and the surrounding area. And this charity works in western Nepal around a city called Pokhara, which is close to Annapurna, which will subsequently feature in this story. And it started in the villages when the founder, Douglas, was approached by one of the Nepali women with a child in her arms, and she wanted help, and he didn't know what was wrong. He wasn't a doctor, and the child died. And they subsequently found out that the child was just dehydrated, and if she'd had a glass of water, she would have survived. And that shocked him very much into founding this charity. And its initial existence was to establish daycare health centers in the villages, so that there was at least one mother, normally, who was trained in a certain amount of medical matters, like a paramedic, and she had a stock of basic medicines like paracetamol and aspirin. And they could, the healthcare worker could identify if the child, older person, was in sick and needed real medical help. And if they were, then they would walk down from the village down to Pokhara if they could manage it. And otherwise, they would have to be carried on somebody's back because there were no roads in this part of Nepal. And these people lived in very, very remote villages. They cooked and heated over open fires in their houses, which often resulted in the children suffering injuries and or death as a result of falling into the fires or smoke inhalation. And there was a huge amount to be done. So Douglas established a charity in the 1990s. And by the time I became involved, it also had a center in Pokhara itself where there were doctors, and the children were being properly treated if they came into the medical center. But one of the major problems was malnutrition. So the children came in very malnourished, and the doctors had to prescribe specially adjusted medicines for them because they were so tiny that they didn't necessarily have bodies capable of taking the prescriptions which would normally be made for a child of that age. And that developed from the medical side into helping children with education and helping street children, because in Nepal there is no concept of social services. So if a child leaves home, runs away from home, gets thrown out of their home, there is nowhere for them to go unless they're taken in by somebody like Fagin, which is a serious risk. So they set up a center for the children to go to get food, to be able to cook food. They get the food, but they have to cook it themselves. To get medical care and to get basic educational skills, reading and writing. The charity developed a policy of not setting up orphanages or supporting orphanages because the children in orphanages were often exploited. They were eventually thrown out and had nowhere to go, and they weren't necessarily trained for living on their own. And and often they were run by people who actually pocketed the money themselves and didn't spend enough on the children. So the idea was to help the children survive on the streets or in shelters rather than actually go into an orphanage, which might, to a Westerner, seem to be the obvious solution. And then that developed into a training center called Jyoti, where the children could be trained up for doing the sorts of jobs which they might be able to do. So they were trained up. We've got some of the girls as hairdressers, boys and girls were trained as electricians, and they got skills like that. And they also got counseling. So it seemed to me from the very beginning to be a very worthwhile charity and to be something which I could throw my efforts into, because either I like to be involved, which is normally deeply involved, or I'm not involved at all. During my professional career, although I'd advised lots of charities and often been asked to be a charity trustee, I decided that it wasn't compatible with being an advisor. So I wanted, as part of my early retirement, to do that. And I left my first meeting as chairman.
Gosh, that was a rapid promotion.
So there were lots of reasons for that, which I won't go into. Meantime, because of my law reform activities, the Society of Public Teachers of Law had put my name forward for an embryonic organization called, which is now called the Academy of Social Sciences. So I found myself, never having done anything academic apart from my degree, as an academician of the Academy of Social Sciences. And when I was preparing for my retirement, I thought, well, they put out a call for people to advise on a committee. So I joined the committee. And as luck would have it, the president got threatened by his university that either he would give up his presidency or he could lose his job. So he gave up his role as president, and the chairman of my committee became president, and she invited me to join the council. So I found myself in very short order chairman of what is now Kidasha and honorary secretary of the Academy of Social Sciences.
Gosh, that's retirement.
And so I still was doing a little bit of work, and Ruth had said to me, well, the main aim of your retirement is to do things which we enjoy. So we like long distance walking and we like traveling. So we started to walk the Thames Path, which starts roughly near Cirencester at Thames Head. And we walked all the way to the Thames Barrier near Greenwich. In bits and pieces, but we said, well, that's not really satisfactory. We want to do longer walks. So over the years, we've walked the West Highland Way, the Pennine Way, the Coast to Coast, and then outside the UK, we've walked from Siena to Rome, and we've walked in the Dolomites. We've walked across from France into Spain. We've done a lot of trekking, and eventually we decided at Kidasha that we needed to raise a lot more money. So we decided to do some fundraising treks. And the first fundraising trek in 2006 was to walk up to Annapurna Base Camp near Pokhara. And I was able to take Ruth there. I'd been out there already to visit it once, but all the trekkers and Ruth came too. We walked up to Annapurna Base Camp, which is about 4,300 meters. Saw lots of silverback monkeys in the hills, and then we went and saw a lot of the projects, both in the villages and in the towns. And then 2 years later, we trekked up to Everest Base Camp, which was quite a bit, well, and in many ways, it was quite a bit easier. It was 1,000 meters higher, but the Annapurna trek, there was one day when we went up 3,000 steps, then down 3,000 steps to a river, which we had to cross, and then up 3,000 steps the next in the afternoon. So it was a total of 9,000 steps, which was tough for people who live in Hampstead Garden suburb. Whereas Everest was just a continuous climb up, and it was very motivating. We did fortunately raise a lot of money, and it was amazing to stand at the foot of Mount Everest where we could actually see the top.
Marvelous. Now, as the leader of the photographic group, could we have you? I think you brought some photographs.
I have indeed.
Well, could I persuade you to let us have a look?
You can twist my arm.
Well.
So this will go on for about 10 or 15 minutes, if you will allow.
That's good.
Just to show you, sorry, I just got to move the screen a bit. This is the family on my 70th birthday. This is not taken by me, as you can tell. I'm in the middle. But it was a very happy day, and it was great to have everybody there.
So how many children do you have?
I've got two sons. I don't know whether you can see my pointer. Ben there and Alex there, who are now in their mid-40s. Ben is married to Liz. That's Ruth. And these are my terrible grandchildren, Isabel and Matthew, and my sister Diana, who lives up the road.
Lovely.
So that's just to introduce the family. And then this is it's going to be quite a crazy careering through some of my photos. I've got 350,000 photos on my computer, so this is just a slightly random selection. This is as we drove out of Pokhara into the Himalayas towards Annapurna, and then we trekked up to Annapurna Base Camp. As you can tell from this photo, it was actually quite warm. We stayed in tea houses. So this was the Hotel Grand View. And we stayed in these little rooms. What you can't tell from this is that whilst in the daytime it was lovely and sunny, at night it was well below freezing. And Ruth will tell you that we were staying in one of these rooms on the first floor. If she wanted to go to the loo, she had to get out of her 2 sleeping bags and go along the corridor in the open, down to a staircase over here, across the yard and into the loo block.
Oh, gosh.
And then back, and then into the bedroom, and then back into the 2 sleeping bags, and just hope that she could get to sleep before she had to go next time.
Before she had hypothermia, you mean?
Indeed. So whilst we did carry quite heavy packs, these were the guys who carried the really heavy stuff. By this stage, there were limits on how much they were allowed to carry. They were only allowed to carry 30 kilos, which is very, very heavy. And here it's quite flat, but other places it was mountainous. As we went, we passed the girls going to school. They used to run down 1,000 steps and up 1,000 steps, didn't bother them at all. But they were used to it. This is another guest house at 2,900 meters, where, of course, they provided a very Nepalese dish of hot pizza. Here we are standing very close to Annapurna Base Camp. In fact, we had to go through the snow to get to where we were. But this is a picture of us looking very happy in the sunshine. And this is at Annapurna Base Camp. And just to show you that you could get anything anywhere, this was the German Fresh Bakery. Although I have to tell you that if you wanted to go up to the top of Annapurna, you would not wish to have German cinnamon rolls or apple pies. They were really not what we expect. When we got back down, we went to the Asha Clinic, which was one of the children's clinics, which was funded and run effectively by Kid Asha. The way that the charities run in Nepal is everything has to be done by local charities, and so Kid Asha was the funding charity, but we also provided all the expertise to get them up and running and to monitor them. And the aim was to move on from one project to the other, get them started. Very much bottom up. It would be projects which the local people wanted to do, and then we would find the money, find the expertise, and help them get started, get going. And this is, you can see along the wall, it actually says Jyoti. This is the wall of the Children's Training Center. And behind is Fishtail Mountain, which is one of the main mountains of the Annapurna range. And we went quite close to it as when we were doing our climb. Now, moving swiftly on 2 years later, this is the next group of people standing and kneeling in front of Mount Everest, which is where the wind is blowing up there with a cloud. This was our trek up to Mount Everest. And again, we started in the sunshine, and it just got colder and colder as we went. One of the most remarkable experiences was seeing the yaks. And as you can tell, they have very big horns, and they don't have a reverse gear. So if you met yaks going across a very slim bridge, and this is one of the little bridges, I haven't got a picture of one of the big bridges, but I just like this picture with the sunlight shining. If you saw yaks coming towards you across a bridge like this, you went backwards as fast as you possibly can, because they just kept on coming. And if you encountered one on a narrow mountain path, you squeezed yourself against the mountain you didn't ever go on the outside of the path because the yaks would just knock you off.
What is a yak? It's a hybrid, isn't it?
Well, no, it's a natural animal, but it's they only live in the very high regions. They've got very special blood. And there were, of course, everywhere we went, there were more kids going to school. As you can see, they were just wearing sandals, and they all had uniforms. That's the one of the sort of crazy things about Nepal. All the school children wear uniform, and this is a magical place. It's called Namche Bazaar. It's genuinely a bazaar, as you can see. It's when you go out of the valleys up into the mountains, when you're going towards Mount Everest, Namche Bazaar is the one town you have to go through, and it's the biggest town, and it's very high. Well, it's very high up by that area, and over the mountains, not very far away, is Tibet, and all these people working in the market are actually Tibetans, and they bring their stuff over from Tibet and sell it in Nepal, particularly to the tourists and the mountaineers, because they can get a much better price for it in Nepal than they can at home. And that's very characteristic Nepali architecture. Lots of blue roofs and blue windows, but the windows have got a lot of wood in them to keep out the cold as well, so they don't use much glass.
Is colour blue significant? Because in some cultures, it keeps off the evil eye, I believe.
There's a lot of blue in a very special colour in India, which we've also been to. They never talked about it, but it could well be. And just everything was for sale, and because of course this area was very much travelled by tourists from the West. Everything was in English. By the way, don't have yak's butter tea. That's awful.
Oh my goodness, how sweet.
I just love this kid. There we were walking along the path, and we were all streaming. Our group was all streaming past this little girl, and there she was looking at us upside down. And as you can see from the sign, that breakfast and lunch were available, but we didn't know what he did for dinner. So that's the site of Mount Everest. Mount Everest is in the center. The mountain on the right, which is Lopsi, looks as though it's higher, but it's not, because it's foreshortened. But that was a first view of Mount Everest in the clouds. And then we went to stay at or next to a monastery called Tengboche, and this was the view of the mountain from Tengboche, with prayer flags hanging above us.
How long were you away on these treks? What are you talking about? 6 weeks or a month or what?
About 3.5 weeks. So this is Tengboche Monastery, as it was then. Because they have so many open fires, they have lots of fires in buildings, and actually this building has been mainly destroyed and completely rebuilt many, many times, and it was destroyed a few months after we were there, and they've rebuilt it.
I'm assuming that's not a Christian monastery.
No, it's a Buddhist monastery,
right.
And we were very privileged to go to some Buddhist ceremonies there. And these are the monks' houses, and this is the hotel.
Do the monks wear saffron-coloured? I know in Cambodia they wear bright yellow clothes.
They would normally wore red, a very dark burgundy red, but often with a yellow sash or scarf. And just here, we saw Sir Edmund Hillary's wife. We were just up the hill, having a little walk, looking down on the village, and then this helicopter came clattering in. I mean, helicopters are remarkably rare in Nepal, and this huge noise came clattering in, and out she came because there was a school which had been founded by the Hillarys, and she had come to visit it. So that was, and the whole town turned out to see her. This is a monk wearing his typical clothes, and he's actually on the roof rolling out carpets for a special ceremony. But it's a very long distance lens. He was a very long way up. Here are more yaks walking across the hillside, and that's Everest in the background. And there's a German bakery, if you can just see the words bakery on the green roof. That's another German bakery. For some reason, German bakeries seem to be very popular amongst the Nepalese.
What are the yaks fed on? I mean, there's obviously no grass. I was thinking they're like Western cows with the milk and the stuff. What?
They would nibble the trees.
Herbivores.
Yeah, at this level, there are still plenty of trees, so that they would. There is grass, and there are also trees, so that they would eat that sort of nourishment. As we went up into the mountain, we came into this very somber field. You can see there are these little cairns all along, and those are the memorials that people have erected to people who died on Everest. Because if you die on Everest, it's too dangerous to bring down the body, and the bodies are left on Everest permanently frozen forever, as was Mallory's body when they found him about 10 years ago. He died in I think 1924, and his body was discovered in about 2010, and it was still perfect, but they're never brought down. So this is the field, and there are cairns all over it to all the many people who've died on the mountain. And this one's got out of order. This is us coming back down from Everest Base Camp towards one of the encampments where we would stay. Oh yes, when we got to the encampment, we had the fantastic privilege of a shower. You may wonder what this ladder has to do with a shower. Well, the people who worked in the hotel would say, "Would you like a shower?" And you say, "Yes." And they said, "Well, go in there and stand under the hole in the ceiling." And they then proceeded to climb up this ladder with a bucket of scalding water and pour it through the hole up there so you could have your shower. And needless to say, your shower was very short. There we are. That was actually quite a warm day, so I'm not wearing very much. Ruth is wearing everything she possibly could wear.
Did you have a trained guide for these treks? I mean, this all seems, how did you know where to go?
Being that there's only mainly one route up and one route down, same path, that wasn't terribly difficult, but nonetheless, it was very dangerous. It could be very dangerous. So we actually had, on this trip, we had a guide, an English guide, mountain guide, and we had a doctor, and we had Nepali guides as well. So we were very well equipped with guides. And
who is the chap in the front? Is that, I'm so ignorant. I mean, is that the one in the blue jacket?
This guy with the red jacket, the multicolored hat, he was Dawa, who was our Nepali leader, who was very experienced Sherpa. And these two were cook boys who carried the food and cooking utensils from one place to the next. And then there were other ones. There's one, there's another one, there's another one. Plenty of them in the in the photo. So we had quite a retinue going from place to place, and with our particular tour company, they went into every restaurant that we went to, and they basically kicked out the cooks and washed everything up before we had to eat on the plates, and they were very rigorous, and they served us in the restaurants, and they did a lot of the cooking as well. So I'm leaving Nepal. As I said, this is helter skelter. I've arrived in the Galapagos, and this is a sea lion, and they were very friendly. And if you went in the water, they would come up and play with you. So although he's actually croaking and shouting, it's more of a welcome than an attack. There's a famous waved albatross, of which there were many. They land on some of the islands in the Galapagos to lay their eggs.
Amazing wingspan. Well,
yes.
Yeah.
And then we went to another island, and this is a fisherman cutting up the fish on this concrete table. And underneath, he's got his friends, the sea lion and the pelicans, all waiting to feast on whatever he was going to throw away. They all got on perfectly well with each other. That was an amazing sunset in the Galapagos. And from the sublime to the ridiculous, this is Golders Hill Park. And I was there one day when it was really overcast, and I decided I'd take some photos in black and white. So this blasted heath is actually only a few hundred yards away from where most of us live.
Did you meet King Lear, or had he moved on already?
He'd moved on. And this is one of the photos I like because of the colors and the shapes. So this is me being on my photographic kick. That's a friendly emu, which I hope you can still see there.
So are we in Australia now?
No, it's called Golders Hill Park.
Oh, I see, right, okay.
And I was strolling down through the woods below the butterfly house, and this squirrel decided to come and chat to me. So out in the back garden on one winter's day, just catching the sunlight on the snow. And now we're in Hong Kong, where it's the glorious contrast between the traditional Chinese junks and the modern skyscrapers in the background. I particularly like this one because of the light on the sails.
Is your camera equipment heavy to take around with you? I mean,
yes. I don't have a very big camera. I use mainly a single lens reflex, but it has a smaller size lens, so the smaller size sensor, so the lenses are relatively light compared to the sort of cameras you see professional photographers using. That is almost the last time we had snow, which is about, I don't know, 13 years ago, with my grandchildren and their snowman in the back garden. This is my granddaughter holding onto her father's leg, grinning away. And then we're transported to Udaipur in India. This is a palace, the Lake Palace Hotel. It was a palace, it's now been turned into a hotel at Udaipur. It's just magical. We did manage to stay there, and it was beautiful inside as well. But wherever you went, there were people, and lots of people on their motorbikes. This is quite a modest one. There's only 3 people on it. We did see 5 or 6 on one motorbike. and then transported to the Taj Mahal. This is early one morning, and you can see the people queuing up down below. And then this is the queue to actually get into the Taj Mahal. But it's very beautiful and dramatic. And from there, we went to Varanasi, which used to be called Benares, on the Ganges. And we went down river at night, and it was all lit up with lights, which have got reflections here. This is the funeral pyres, because it's the most sacred thing to be buried or to be cremated on the banks of the Ganges, and for your ashes to be scattered in the river in the Hindu religion. This is two of our fellow tourists lighting little candles, which they then floated on the river, lighted to mark respect. And while we were doing that, the young Indians were on a party boat dancing their way down the river with very, very loud noise. And in the early morning, the river was full of people going on rowing boats along the river to see what there was to see. And of course, people, this is less than a mile away from the cremation center. People go and bathe in the Ganges. That's a sort of sacred ritual, and people may have come from hundreds or thousands of miles away to bathe in the Ganges. Meantime, this rower is passing by the boats moored at the side, many tourist boats, and you can just see the level of pollution behind him. Eleni, you were asking about blue. This is a photo I took in Jodhpur, in central India, and they had the Brahmins live in painted blue houses. It may be that some of these are no longer occupied by Brahmins, but the blue paint they use kills off mosquitoes, and is therefore regarded as very, very effective and very much to be desired. I just love this guy on the motorbike. He was whizzing by, and he wasn't looking at the road, he was looking at me, and I was looking at him. Wherever you went in India, people had incredible turbans, very colourful.
Are they significant, the different colours?
Never got to learn that. It seemed they had different colours. Everybody had different colours, so I don't think that there was any significance. And then just driving along the road, we stopped for a moment, and there was this bullock cart, and this lady was driving it from the side. So from the sublime to the ridiculous in India, you can see the electric pylons on the left, and the modern buses, and the bullock cart in the centre. Oh, that's the same one. Sorry about that.
Did you take any of Agra? Because I was very struck when I went to the Taj Mahal, how Agra seemed to be still using very primitive forms of farming. I mean, it was selling Agra marble like mad, but the actual farming there, I don't know if you took any photos in Agra itself.
I did. I could do a talk about that alone. So I've just some odd highlights. So, of course, the Taj Mahal was built by a Mughal who was a Muslim. And this down the road is a Hindu temple. Huh? And the colors and the designs are completely different. This is just at the side of a motorway. But I was just taken by the sheer exuberance of it. This was our farewell to India, girls in the back of a tiny little tuk-tuk on their way to school. And now, a momentary visit to Kew Gardens. Just amazing lily pads. And
oh, goodness me, how wonderful.
yes. I should know the name of this, and Ruth will no doubt tell me when we've finished, but I've forgotten offhand. And I've been talking about this charity, Kadasha, which works for the children in Nepal, and I'm still a great supporter. During the pandemic, I have been isolating because I'm immunocompromised. So there's a field behind my house, which is 100 yards long, and I decided that I would walk around it like Captain Tom. In fact, I started before Captain Tom, but the publicity got going before I was able to, for him, got going before I was able to latch onto it. So that I waited a year, and from April, 1st of April 2021, I'm walking from London to Rome around this field, and I have so far done about 8,500 laps.
How many more to go?
I think about 3,500. So I've done 926 miles. I've walked 926 miles so far, and the total is 1,127.
Your Fitbit must be ecstatic recording your steps.
I broke my Fitbit. I had to resort to another brand. I mean, it couldn't stand the pressure.
I'm sure it couldn't.
So that's me in my Kadasha shirt, and I'm also was part of the time working for Immunodeficiency UK, and this red and white badge is for the Confraternity of Pilgrims to Rome, and I contacted them and said I was doing this virtual walk, and they said in that case I could join up. And they supported me. They made a contribution to Kadasha as well. So that's why I'm wearing the badge. And finally, here I am in my London Ambassadors uniform from the 2012 Olympics. Ruth and I were ambassadors. And I thought, well, get out my pink and purple, pink and mauve jacket just to show that I still remember it. It's 10 years ago now. There we are at Victoria Station, which was where we were stationed.
Oh, is that your granddaughter?
It's my granddaughter and my grandson.
Yeah, she's absolutely shocked, isn't she?
She's totally. They're both sort of, as you say, totally shocked. And this is when they were a bit older. Out in the field. This is the field where I'm walking between the houses. The kids enjoying a cake. I think this is 2012 Fun Day on Central Square. So this is Isabel when she was little, trying out all the different expressions she could. And Matthew trying out a different variety of expressions and his inquiring mind.
They're beautiful children.
Thank you. I like to think so. And this is when they're being taught to be photographers themselves.
What an example they've got. Oh.
So a couple of years ago, we went to Rome, no, 3 years ago now. That's in front of St. Peter's. Looking at the Colosseum. I like to put the kids at the front so it gives a sort of sense of depth. And then they learnt to be gladiators. And you will see that Isabel, although younger, is just as keen to be a gladiator as Matthew. And that's laying into Dad.
Not Granddad, no.
Granddad had to take the photo.
Oh, I see.
And that was the reward. That's how they are now with their dog in New Zealand. So
they live in New Zealand now?
Yes, they live in New Zealand. And this is my friend Dipendra blowing the pipe, the flute on a mountain pass as we toured around Nepal. Kids looking over the wall. This one very much a Tibetan.
What's he got on his mouth, that one?
I think that it's snot.
Oh, what, this brown thing on, gosh. Okay.
So this one.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's snot.
Oh, right. Okay. How indiscreet of me to mention it.
And this is a farmer, and he's wearing sacking so that he can carry heavy loads without damaging his head. Here is Asha Healthcare out in the fields around Pokhara, giving healthcare and vaccinations to the small kids who otherwise wouldn't have it at all. Mm-hmm. In 2006, I was trekking in the mountains with the team from Kadasha, and we went to inaugurate a new daycare health center up in the mountains. And I was honored with all these flowers and the tika as part of the celebrations. It so happened that this was the time when the truce for the civil war in Nepal had just been signed. And at the same time as I was being honored like this, so was the local Maoist chieftain who came down to join the celebration because they were no longer at war. Shifting to Peru, this is I just love all the colors. And this was when we got to Machu Picchu. It was quite an amazing place. And going back to London, there's a tower in London called the Sky, well, I'm not sure what it's called, it's 20 Fenchurch Street, but it's got Sky Gardens on top. And you can look down on really tall buildings in the city, and this one has a garden on top. I thought it was interesting. This is the higgledy-piggledy traffic as it crosses London. And this is the view from the back of the Sky Garden as they're building the towers around. All of these are now built, but the color of the sky on a sunny day is amazing. And then all the people looking out, trying to work out what they're seeing, and watching people walking out on beams on other buildings. And then more photography. These two girls looking at their camera to see what they'd managed to take in their photos. Down in Camden Passage, would you believe? This is a photograph which has been put on the wall. I'm never quite sure what this one means. Different. And then this is somebody actually. This is real life people walking through the market. And at the same time, a beggar with all his worldly wealth on an old pram. Roger Cookson and I take out the photo group all over London. And this is, believe it or not, the canal at Paddington Basin. It's just got so much mold grown over it that it's gone green.
What, and it's algae?
It's algae, yes, sorry, not mold, algae. And the dark color is created by reflections from a bridge. So it is all this light green color, but the bridge has, the shadow of the bridge has changed it. And that's what the basin looks like in black and white. And I'm just amazed at the number of bicycles parked everywhere. More of the basin. And lastly, a reminder of what topical talks used to be like. Of course, Jack was the chair. And here were lots of people wrapped in enjoyment. And that's the end of the photos.
Gosh,
So I hope they weren't too boring.
they were phenomenal. In fact, I was going to say maybe at some later date, if you wanted to assemble a sort of travelogue in some, I don't know, to a theme, that you'd be very welcome to come back, and if that's what you would like to do.
Well, that's very kind of you. I have a few talks prepared.
I should think
with
you do. Yeah.
with my lovely wife. She does the talking, and,
Okay.
and I do the photos.
Well, when we get a suitable gap in our in conversation schedule, maybe we could talk about that, because they are just phenomenal. Have you won any awards or prizes with your photographs?
No, I'll tell you the truth. I've never been in for a competition.
Oh, I see. Gosh. Well, they are magnificent.
That's very kind of you.
Well, and also I gather that your latest project is a family history. So how's that going?
Well, I've only got 7,900 people in the tree so far.
Only.
So it's a preliminary stage. I've been doing it for the last 13 years. I decided when shortly after, a few years after I took early retirement, and when the grandchildren had arrived, that I really didn't know a lot about a lot of my family, because my mother's family immigrated into the UK in 1914, and they have no relative, or hardly any relatives in the UK. And my father's family came to the UK in 1860, we believe. And they're fairly scattered, and there are whole blocks of the family I know nothing about. And I thought, well, if I don't know about them, my grandchildren are certainly not going to know about them. So I started my family tree with 20 people. And I thought, well, I can add a bit here and a bit there. Then I contacted my daughter-in-law's parents in New Zealand. I said, look, I'm starting this family tree. It's for the grandchildren. Would you like to give me some names to put in the family tree? So there was a long silence. And then after about 3 weeks, I got this email saying, well, we've been talking to some of our cousins. It turns out that people have been doing family trees here. So here are the first 760 names. So there I was with my 780 names, of which 20 were mine and 760 were theirs. So I really got stuck in. And I had a French cousin who had, in the 70s, started writing out exercise books of family tree. So he sent these books to members of the family. He'd spent his whole life doing it. So I started copying the names into the family tree. And there's the big difference, of course, around 2009, by that stage when I started, was that there was software like Ancestry.com, or in our country, Ancestry.co.uk, and there was software to go on the computer, so you could actually store all this information. So whereas previously it had all been in handwriting in books, it was now possible to do it on computers. And I found it fairly easy to add members of the family, but then actually getting depth is much more difficult.
Yeah.
And last summer, I found out that I was related to Esther Ranson.
Oh, very nice.
On the wrong, on a part of the family that I knew nothing about, but she made some comments which were online, and it just triggered some thoughts in my mind. But unfortunately, I haven't found anybody who was particularly famous or particularly notorious, apart from her, in the family tree. But I have found out that my daughter-in-law is a 10th cousin of the Queen.
Oh, gosh, wow.
Only one of about 100,000.
Oh, I see. And I know you've got Esther Ranson in one of the topical talks. So
yes,
no doubt you've used family elbowing to persuade her.
One uses any technique one can, and that certainly featured.
I know it's been so fascinating. I don't know if anybody wants to ask any questions. Anybody's got, I don't know if you can facilitate that at all.
If you want to ask a question, you've got to unmute.
Okay. Anybody wanting to ask any questions?
I'd like to ask Myke about his back operation. Did he have it before he did all this walking and climbing, or afterwards?
Before. I've been very lucky. I mean, my first back operation was quite minor in real terms. My second back operation was sufficiently serious that I had to learn to walk again. But when I recovered from my back operation, I could only just stagger a few steps. So I had to learn to walk again, and I walk with sticks.
That didn't answer the question. Did you do that before the walking?
Well, I had
the mountains.
Yes, yeah. The back operations were before the big walks.
Wow.
So your Captain Tom activity, you're using 2 sticks, are you?
Yes. So for normal walking, I mean, in the home I can manage perfectly well without sticks. But if I'm walking casually, short distances, going to the shops or something, which I haven't done for 2 years, then I use 1 walking stick. But if I'm going to walk long distances, I use 2 sticks. So last time we did a real trek, Ruth and I walked from Ilkley in Yorkshire to we walked across the Dales Way, and we ended up at Lake Windermere.
Oh, lovely.
So the route we took, which was slightly more than the normal route, was 100 miles, and we did that in about 9 or 10 days.
Wow.
Myke, I just can't believe what you've done after back operations, but I can't resist telling you, I failed the trusts paper in my bar finals the first time. And I learned, nobody else will know what this means, but I learned about the Earl of Chesterfield's trust thoroughly twice, and they didn't ask a question on it, which infuriated me. Last in, first out, all that sort of stuff. Your photos are marvellous. It's all fascinating.
Absolutely brilliant. How do you manage to carry a camera then when you've got to use 2 sticks? If you're
I use a rucksack. If I'm just walking around the town, then normally I can manage with 1 stick and just carry it on my chest like normal. And some of the photos you've seen were actually taken with a lighter camera, because going up in the mountains, when I went up Everest, for instance, I took a lighter camera. There are cameras called bridge cameras, which are compact cameras but have all the controls of a single lens reflex, so you can use the facilities.
Well, I'm so thrilled that you included photos. They are just marvellous. And as I say, I'd really love to ask you back again. When it's the same conversation, I won't be doing much speaking, but we'll hand it over to you for these are just brilliant. I mean, wonderful photographs. Thank you very, very much indeed, Myke.
My pleasure.
I feel very sorry anyone who's missed this wonderful event has missed out on some marvellous photos. Thank you very, very much indeed.